Welcome in to the Arrowhead Pride Rapid Reaction Show. I'm Steven Serda, Rocky Magana joining me. Rocky, thank you so much for joining me at this late hour on a Sunday night. I feel like everybody probably would have preferred that we didn't have an hour and 15-minute rain delay in this football game, so we could have just gotten it over with. Yeah, this isn't fun right now. We're used to, in the Patrick Mahomes era, as Kansas City Chiefs fans, being able to have these post-game shows where we're excited and we're juiced after big wins, where the Chiefs look like an unstoppable force, unlike anything the NFL has ever seen. And that is not what this 2-3 football team looks like right now, Rocky. And I want to open things up tonight. And if you're watching us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, whatever, comment. We'll try to get to them throughout the show. We're in this together. It's suffering through a storm in Kansas City, hour 15-minute rain delay, 2-3 start, and the Chiefs just generally looking like they've got a lot of problems right now. It's as bad as it could probably get, and it's as bad as it's ever been in the Mahomes era. And so I want to open things up by apologizing to you, Chiefs fans, for myself, because I have been so stuck in the idea, and part of it is how special Patrick Mahomes is, that this team will just figure things out, because with him as their starter, they've always figured it out, right? Even in 2018, when the defense was the worst defense in football, they still figured it out. They were still an unstoppable force. And this season, it's not happening that way. And I don't think it's that teams have just straight up figured them out by any means. I think that we are seeing, Rocky, and it's catching up to us fast. What it feels like is that these windows don't last forever with the makeup of a roster. Now, Mahomes has been so special the past 3 years, and so we've felt like this is never going to end. It doesn't matter who you put around him and what you do. It feels like the window's closing, like on the makeup of what the Chiefs have built here with this. Obviously, Patrick Mahomes is going to be one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL for a really, really long time. Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce are exceptional Hall of Fame caliber players, but I'm talking about everybody else. I'm talking about the defense. I'm talking about the overall roster construction of what they've got right now. I'm not talking about those guys. I'm not talking about the guys that you know are exceptional. I'm talking about everything else that's around them, because this is worst case scenario, Rocky. Like, this is worst case scenario where everything around them is not working outside of those guys. And then tonight was just the rock bottom game where none of it worked. Not even Mahomes, not even Tyreek Hill, not even Travis Kelce. Like, it was just a total dumpster fire of a football game. I even had an extra hour to think of how I wanted to approach this and how to do this. And I don't know any other way to describe it than that. It was just an absolute total dumpster fire by the Kansas City Chiefs. And it does not look like they've gotten anything figured out through 5 weeks of the NFL season.
No, and I think the best way that I can describe what tonight felt like from my perspective is that it felt like one of those Chevy Chase National Lampoon Family Vacation movies where it's just a series of unfortunate events unfolding and building up upon themselves over and over again. I mean, you're right. I tweeted out earlier tonight that I think in 5 years we're going to be looking back and saying, oh, well, at least our defense isn't the 2021 Chiefs, right? Anytime that you got to send 7 people to get pressure on the quarterback, then that's a recipe for this. It's a recipe for disaster. You're not going to consistently put pressure on the quarterback, and you're not going to find success, and you're going to get beat deep over the top in a lot of situations if you try to do that consistently. Now, it seemed like the Chiefs came out after halftime and had more success when they did start bringing pressure, but you try doing that week in, week out, it's not sustainable. It's not a sustainable way to win games in the NFL.
Yeah, it just simply isn't, and they can't generate pressure. They don't have a pass rush. Frank Clark, I feel like the only time we even mentioned his name was when he was getting hit with a penalty that overturned an interception. Where, like, if you were still that optimistic Chiefs fan and you had for any second of this game thought they could still do this, it was that interception where Frank Clark got called for that penalty and overturned everything. And you were like, okay, well, this is it.
It's
This is the end. This is legitimately rock bottom. I don't know if it can get worse than this performance in prime time on Sunday night football. Now, they do have a favorable schedule coming up. So I still think that they can figure some of that out. And I still think that the schedule is going to help them, get back over 500. I don't think they're a sub 500 football team because Patrick Mahomes is just Patrick Mahomes. But this is the worst team that he has been a part of during his time in the NFL. And it's without question. And this makeup of this defense worked last season to the point where they rebuilt it and went out and it got them two consecutive Super Bowls, and they won one and they lost one because the offensive line fell apart, and they went out and they rebuilt that. But then in rebuilding the offensive line, they did not dump any more resources into the defense outside of drafting Nick Bolton, which has not worked out for them in any way. I don't think that's all on Nick. I think Nick is being put in poor situations, and I think he has no business, being put in those situations at this point in his career, but it is what it is. But they went into this season saying we have to put all of our resources into the offensive line, and that's going to be enough to get us back to a Super Bowl. And then completely overlooked, like, oh, well, what if this falls apart? And the defense has totally fallen apart. It just simply has. Like, there's not, in the first half of this game, the Chiefs were slow playing the Bills and not attacking the Bills. And this was before the rain.
Mhm.
This is before the weather got bad. They were slow playing the Bills, in my opinion, to keep the defense off of the field because they thought this is how we can win this game. They were doing what other teams do to them on the offensive side of the ball, but it wasn't to keep the Bills offense off the field. It was to keep their defense off of the field because that's how bad it's been. Like, that's not a good situation to be in. You could never look at a unit of your team and say, well, we just got to try to keep them off the field. And if we limit the opportunities for the Bills offense to attack them, then we might have a chance of winning this game. That to me says that they came into this game knowing we've got problems and we're not as good as that football team. And we saw that throughout the entire evening.
Yeah, 100%. And with this defensive makeup as it is, like you said, yeah, it isn't good enough. And what we're seeing now, I think, is we had a defense that probably, honestly, without Mahomes' magic, wasn't really good enough to get us to the Super Bowl if we didn't have an out-of-this-world talent, Patrick Mahomes, bringing us back from the brink time after time after time last year. And I think what you see now is where we have some subpar athletes on defense, a la Dan Sorensen, who has no business starting an NFL game ever again, in my opinion. And he's now 2 years older than he was when we had our first Super Bowl appearance. He was slow as a safety to begin with, and now he's 2 years slower, and so with a lot of this has to be hung on Brett Veach as well. Yeah, he inherited an unbalanced roster, and he's the one that got us Patrick Mahomes, but he's also the one that traded a first-round draft pick for Frank Clark and gave him that contract. He's also the one that's been reactionary as a GM, and he waited until we got embarrassed in the Super Bowl to fix the offensive line. He didn't see ahead of time that this was going to be an issue. He didn't see ahead of time that I need to fix the defense going into this season along with fixing the offensive line. It's great that he fixed the offensive line, but that's only half of your football team, man. You know what I mean? And as a GM, it's your job to build a solid roster from top to bottom. And he just has not done that at this point.
So at 2-3 on the season, and I want to get back to this for a second because I have this rule for myself personally where I try not to draw conclusions that I won't move off of anytime before we're 4 weeks into an NFL season. I think a month in, you can look at teams and say, okay, I know what that team is, despite, a performance here and there where they perform above expectation or something like that. I did not do that with this Chiefs team. And I think a lot of people weren't doing it with this Chiefs team because they've been so incredible. They've been so dominant under Patrick Mahomes. And we're finally seeing like this is what happens when you're so top heavy for so long, when that top heavy nature of your roster doesn't pay off, everything else still starts to fall apart. And we're seeing that right now. Like I said, schedule's getting easier. They've got Washington next week. That should be a win. They should beat that football team. They should not struggle to stop the Washington football team next season and Taylor Heineke. They probably will because that's how bad this defense is. But I think that game should be similar to the Eagles game where it's just them putting on a show. I understand that the offense did not perform up to their standards tonight, but they went against a Buffalo Bills defense that I was absolutely doubting and questioning all week long because of their schedule early in the season. And the Bills defense was good. Now, I think a lot of it had to do with they just didn't have it tonight. Mahomes was off target. Guys just weren't getting open. The Clyde Edwards-Helaire injury that looks to be significant that we haven't even really talked about. And we'll talk about that here in a second. It all fell apart. This is a come to Jesus type of game where you have to start figuring out like, we've got to change things. We've got to change some stuff up because this is not working. And I don't think that this game, in the long run, they probably needed this game because the offense constantly bailing the defense out is no way to live in the modern day NFL. Things change too quickly and they've been so dominant for so long. Now we're figuring out, oh, this is what it looks like for the rest of the league. Like this is what happens across the entire National Football League. And it's even Patrick Mahomes is not immune to it. And that's what we're figuring out right now. That was hard for us to get to. And that's why I'm apologizing to each and every one of you right now, because it took me longer to get there than I'm comfortable with. And I'm mad at myself about it because I kept telling myself, oh, they'll figure it out. Mahomes always figures it out. He always overcomes that stuff. You can't live like that in the NFL, Rocky. Like it's kind of the clock's going to run out on it sooner or later. And tonight the clock ran out on it. And so now it's time for everybody in this organization to take a step back and say, okay, we got to fix this thing because we're 2-3 through 5 weeks and all 3 of our losses are in the AFC. We're essentially eliminated from the number 1 seed in the playoffs right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. And I think that a lot of us fans, how quickly we forget, this was our life as Chiefs fans pre-Patrick Mahomes, like for a long time, this is all we ever knew. And then we get, 3 or 4 years of the good life and how quickly we forget, the reality. And it's one of those things where, we're going to struggle to even win the division at this point. I can't see us making up 2 games on the Chargers at this point, and so we're looking at what at best case scenario, maybe a wild card, but then you looking at the wild card, do you think that the Chiefs can string together 3 straight victories against good teams in the playoffs right now? I mean, so a Super Bowl in my mind is almost off the books at this point.
Yeah. It's not to say that they can't turn this around in some regard. Again, the schedule, they've got a nice little 3-game run here where they could pick up some wins and kind of turn this thing around and possibly be 5-3 instead of the 2-3 that they are right now. But with 3 losses in the AFC this early in the season and the expanded playoffs, like you're making it virtually impossible that you're going to have a first round bye this year. Like it just seems like it's probably off the table at this point because you're just going to have to run the table and you got some tough games still on the schedule, not to mention you're playing in one of the toughest divisions in football. And They got a favor by the Raiders and the Broncos both dropping games today, but the Chargers won another crazy game against the Cleveland Browns, but they improved to 4-1, and they look like they're one of the best teams in football right now. And they gave up a lot of points to the Cleveland Browns, but so did the Chiefs. And even though they did that today, I still don't feel as bad about the Chargers defense as I do about the Chiefs defense. You mentioned Daniel Sorensen. It's not as simple as everybody thinks it is to just plug and play Juan Thornhill. Like the two instances where Dan was just horrendously bad tonight, Juan Thornhill was on the field for both of those plays. But it's not as easy as just simply putting Juan Thornhill in the game and having Dan not in the game anymore. They don't have the personnel to replace him, really, in a full-time status. Yes, Juan Thornhill should be playing more snaps, absolutely, but Dan's still going to be on the field even in that circumstance. He's still going to find plays, and the verdict's out. The tape's out. Everybody knows, target 49. He's a straight-up liability in the secondary. Like, he's just a straight up liability. He can't guard tight ends. He can't guard wide receivers. So what are we doing here? Because Juan Thornhill can't be worse. Like, even though I know Dan probably can't come off the field in a full-time capacity, Juan Thornhill should at least be out snapping Dan Sorensen at this point.
I mean, you got to do something. Honestly, yeah, Dan Sorensen's going to have to be on the field sometimes, but I think there's also ways to limit him being on the field, and maybe it means not having three safeties on the field in certain situations where you would normally – I mean, maybe you bring in DeAndre Baker off the bench, and, yeah, maybe he's not as good in the run game, but how many missed tackles have Sorensen had this year? You know what I mean? He's going to be better in the coverage game. I mean, at this point right now, with the level of play that Dan Sorensen's playing at, I don't care if you put a cornerback in his position. He's not tackling people. He's not a reliable tackler, and he can't cover people. So at least have somebody in there who can cover somebody and not get beat for the big play. Because if I'm going to give up a 7-yard run anyway, then at least give me somebody that's not going to give up a 45-yard pass time and time again.
Yeah. He is a liability in coverage. He cannot tackle. And I think at halftime he was leading them in tackles. I don't know if he wound up finishing the game that way. He might have, but it's just simply a product of, they're just throwing at him more than anybody else. That's why he's leading the team in tackle. It's not because he's good at it.
If you jump on top of somebody after they beat you for a 30-yard diving catch, then you get a tackle. So, I mean, it's just because he's involved in every play because they're going his direction every single time. And I think today you also saw that, unfortunately, the Chiefs really missed Charvarius Ward not being on the field. And we don't hear his name a lot, but that's also because he's a pretty good coverage guy. He's not going to get a lot of interceptions, but he's not going to get beat a lot deep. And you saw that the Chiefs got beat a lot deep, especially early in this game.
Yeah, and the wheels just fell off this thing tonight. And like I mentioned, in the long run, this could be a good thing because in the Patrick Mahomes era, this just isn't something that they've had to suffer through very often, and something we as fans haven't had to suffer through very often. So it might be good for all of us, to be totally honest, to come back down to earth in our expectations a little bit. Patrick Mahomes is not invincible. This team is not invincible. They've got a lot of problems that they have to figure out right now. And that Clyde Edwards-Helaire injury did not look good. The way he got rolled up on his knee, and then they ruled him out quick. He had to be carried off the field by his teammates, and then he immediately went to the locker room. It does not look like a good injury. We're still awaiting some type of official word. I would imagine that that'll probably come out tomorrow. He'll probably get an MRI or something like that. And we'll have more for you guys at arrowheadpride.com when we do have some more information on that injury and the severity of it. But I feel bad for Clyde because he was looking better coming off of 2 really strong games after the fumble against the Baltimore Ravens. It didn't work out in his favor tonight, but it was another circumstance where I don't think they put him in a good situation as a player. Like, it was apparent to me in the first half of this game that the Chiefs were intentionally slow playing everything. It was first down runs, second down runs. Like, they were intentionally trying to draw out these drives. And I know they've been doing that a little bit more lately based on the looks that they've been getting from opposing defenses. but it felt more intentional tonight. It felt like that was the game plan when the game started, was to run the football early and try to maintain the clock and keep possessions and have slow, methodical drives where you can keep the Bills offense off of the field because you just knew your defense couldn't do anything against it. And I don't know how you fix that. Like, maybe it's Willie Gay. He started the second half in place of Ben Neiman. And so that covered up one of your glaring holes. And we saw that make a difference, I guess, after the hour-long rain delay. Maybe it was the weather and the delay that made the difference. But they actually got stops when Willie Gay started the second half at linebacker in place of Ben Neiman. We know he's more athletic than Ben Neiman, so we assume that he's just going to be better, and I hope that he is long-term. But that doesn't make up for the other holes that you have in the secondary. And so they've got a ton to figure out. And, in season, there's not much you can do aside from, trying to hit the veteran market and see what's out there. We saw the Carolina Panthers make a move for Stephon Gilmore earlier this week, and I would assume that's going to pay off for them because I still believe Stephon Gilmore to be a very talented player. The Chiefs just simply don't have the money with the contracts of guys like Frank Clark, even the money that they spent on Jaron Reed on a 1-year deal and have gotten very little production from him. And then Chris Jones being unhealthy. It's not just a matter of this defense getting healthy. It's a matter of they've got resources put into some bad places, and it's showing up on game day now.
Oh, 100%. And as far as like what's out there, I mean, I don't know what kind of shape he's in, but I'd be out there kicking the tires on a guy like Trey Boston if it's the difference between him or Sorensen being in the game. I mean, I'd bring a guy in off the street. I think I could be mistaken, but I think like Kenny Vaccaro is still out there too. You have some safeties that are pushing 30, but Sorensen's already over 30, and there's some guys out there that you could probably get on some decent contracts that aren't going to be full-time fixes. They're not going to be, something for the future, but they may be a Band-Aid to help us get through the regular season to stop the bleeding a little bit while we can get things together. And as far as Willie Gay goes, I mean, I liked what I saw out of him in the second half. You didn't see a lot, but there was one play in particular I remember where he drove on I think it was on a swing pass on the sideline, and he closed space really, really well. And that athleticism popped off the screen, and I think, the more athletes you can get on the field, athleticism covers up mistakes in a lot of instances.
I want to address something that I'm seeing a ton of in the comments tonight, and it has to do with the offense. And there's a lot of, Mahomes isn't growing anymore. The Chiefs offense isn't doing enough, and the Chiefs offense is figured out now. I totally disagree with that idea. We saw prior to tonight that the Chiefs were scoring at a more efficient rate than they have ever in the Mahomes era. It's just that how long can you keep that up? How long is that sustainable in anyone's mind where you can just score better than anybody else and it's always going to make up for all the deficiencies and all the problems that you have as a football team? That catches up to you sooner or later. It catches up to everyone. And Patrick Mahomes is still young. I still have all the confidence in the world that Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in the league. I'm not ready to crown Justin Herbert that guy over Patrick Mahomes after a 2-3 start after what he's done in the first 3 years of his NFL career. He's an exceptional player. I understand this is what we do. We overreact as fans and we start to question everything that we feel like we know. If you know one thing about this football team, you know that Patrick Mahomes is exceptional. It was a bad football game. Everybody has bad football games. Tom Brady had a bad football game last Sunday night against the New England Patriots. Still managed to win that game, but Tom Brady was terrible in that football game. Everyone's allowed to have bad football games every now and then. So I'm not questioning Patrick Mahomes in any way here. And anybody who is just overreacting to a bad start to the season. But we should be overreacting a little bit to this start because it's not on Mahomes, in my opinion. He wasn't great tonight, and he's had turnover problems. He's had careless mistakes. This Chiefs team has had careless mistakes as a whole, though, and they've had problems with that in the past. Under Andy Reid, even going back to Alex Smith, they've always had penalty problems. They've always had dumb discipline things. Like that's just kind of an Andy Reid ball club type of thing. But under Mahomes, they've always been able to mask that stuff. I make the comparison a lot to Jamal Charles, where Jamal Charles, one of the greatest Chiefs who has ever put the uniform on. Jamal Charles had fumble problems his entire NFL career. And we always just looked it off because Jamal Charles was absolutely exceptional. And we loved everything that he did for the Chiefs. It's kind of been the same way with Mahomes, where these underlying problems, the penalties, the lack of discipline stuff, the dumb mistakes, that's always been there with this team being led by Patrick Mahomes, with this offense, with this defense, all around. It's just that they've been so exceptional the last 3 years, you've been able to overlook that stuff and you don't spend that much time thinking about it. Now they stick out a lot more when it's all falling apart, seemingly.
Well, yeah, and I think – we as fans, we have a tendency to say things like after the Chargers game, oh, well, you take those 4 turnovers away and we win the game. Well, guess what? Bad teams turn the ball over and you can't take those 4 turnovers away. That's undisciplined football. We'll say things like, oh, well, Carl Cheffers will throw the flag on anybody and he's the world's worst ref and he was the ref in the Super Bowl and he hates the Chiefs and all these sort of things. Listen, there may have been a couple bad calls, but it wasn't every single call was a bad call. The Chiefs were committing penalties. Orlando Brown had a horrible holding penalty where he had a series of 3 terrible snaps in a row where he was a complete drive killer, because he was playing bad football tonight, and Mahomes can't cover up everything.
Oh, and like the pick 6, it was a pass that Tyreek Hill absolutely should have caught. Just went right through his hands. And Tyreek Hill had multiple miscues tonight where he just was not on. And you can't have that from Tyreek. Like when you're a football team with this many flaws, you can't have mistakes from all of your stars too, because that's when it starts to catch up to you. Is they've been able to overcome the mistakes by the lack of playmakers on defense and by the lack of pass rush and all of that stuff so far to this point in the season. But when Tyreek makes mistakes, then Mahomes makes mistakes. And then it all started to compile, and we saw Mahomes just drop a snap late in the game for a fumble that was similar to Tyreek Hill just dropping a pass that led to a pick 6. Like, it all just compiled and unfolded before us tonight, and they needed this. Like, I do wholeheartedly believe that this is the wake-up call this football team needs to get some things figured out and turn things around. I still don't believe that this team can truly be as bad as the 2018 Chiefs defense. I'm still going to stick by that opinion because I just think that there's just no way they can truly be that bad. Like, Tyrann Mathieu is better than anybody that they had on that defense. I think a healthy Chris Jones is better than anybody that they had on that defense. So I think that they can get some of that stuff figured out, but you got to come to terms with it. This defense is bad. You just need them to not be the worst defense in the NFL. And so that is going to make me start questioning whether or not this team is legitimately a Super Bowl contender this year, because through 5 weeks, they simply don't look like it.
No, they don't look like it at all. And as you mentioned, a lot of it does go back to the roster building, where if you have a top heavy roster and then a guy like Tyreek Hill, has a miscue, well, then who's there underneath him to pick up the slack? When all you got is 4 or 5 guys and those 4 or 5 guys have miscues, then that's when a free fall happens, like you saw tonight, and then things just start to compile. And I don't see answers on this defense the way it's currently built. Yeah, maybe Chris Jones comes back and he's healthy and if his wrist is good, he's more of a dominant force because he feels more confident in his hand fighting and his bull rush and those sort of things. But is that going to make up for giving up 31 points? Was in the first half, right? I mean, this defense, you're talking like in order for them to become a good defense, they literally have to cut in half the number of points they're giving up a game. And I just don't see that happening.
Yeah, it broke down on every level tonight. Like, in my mind, I think that's the easiest way to put it. And again, they got a lighter schedule coming up before things get tough again. And so they've got a window here to try some things and figure some things out where, the margin of error is going to be a little bit wider than it was tonight. Tonight, I thought we were going to see more from them. I expected more from them because we've always seen them step up in these moments. And this season, it just isn't happening. But again, this thing was going to slow down sooner or later.
Yeah.
Aaron Rodgers is one of the greatest quarterbacks I've also ever seen. He's had bad seasons with the Packers. It's not always just about having the best quarterback in football. And I still believe Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in football. So anybody who's questioning that needs to slow down. But windows close on rosters, and you got to change things up and you got to address things. It worked when they decided to completely overhaul the defense, and it got them a Super Bowl title. Then this offseason, they decided to overhaul the offensive line, but completely overlooked the defense, assuming that this defense was going to be able to hold up for another year. And it just hasn't worked. It just simply hasn't worked. Like, it's just not. The wheels are falling off on that side of the ball. And tonight, the catastrophe leaked into the offense tonight.
Yeah, it's hard to win in the NFL, and if you're standing pat and you're not getting better, then people are catching up to you. And if you had a defense that wasn't dominant, but it was good enough before, and people are sprinting after you to catch up to you, then guess what? You wake up and you're behind. I'm looking forward to next week because I do think we will beat Washington, but then I also don't want to be sitting here next week, eating the fool's gold and saying, "Oh, look, we're so great now. We dominated Washington. What a great, blah, blah, blah victory." But if we're sitting here next week and we're talking about another loss, then I'm really going to be at a low place.
Well, and this stretch of their schedule is particularly weird because they have Washington, then Tennessee, then the New York Giants, and then the Green Bay Packers. So 3 out of those 4 games, one out of those 4 games is an AFC opponent. You've already got 3 AFC losses, and the Packers are playing really good football right now. So you've got a 3-week time frame to try to figure things out before you got to go play Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers. And you can do that against the Washington football team, the Tennessee Titans, and the New York Giants. The Titans have one of the worst defenses in the NFL right now, along with your Kansas City Chiefs. And the same could be said about this Washington defense that we had higher expectations for. And the Giants aren't a great football team. They lost Daniel Jones possibly for an amount of time today. He left the game with a concussion. So we'll see what they try to do. They've got a 3-week time frame here coming up where you're facing competition that if you're still buying into this team turning things around, you're facing 3 teams over the next 3 weeks that you think this team should be better than, correct? So that is a window of opportunity for you to try to figure some things out before you have to take on another serious Super Bowl contending team in the NFC in the Green Bay Packers. So they got to figure some stuff out, Rocky. They simply have to. And I do think this is as bad as it's going to get, hopefully.
Yeah. It's week 6 and we're already talking about must-win football games pretty much every week for the rest of the season. If they want to contend for the AFC West title, it's going to take 13 or 14 wins. And if you do the math right now, they don't have any more losses left to give. If they want to catch the Chargers, they basically have to win out from here, in my opinion. And so every week from here on out, it's a must-win game.
Yeah, I totally agree. They've got a ton of stuff to figure out, and hopefully this is the last time this season that we'll have to have these types of conversations about this team, and hopefully this is that wake-up call where they can turn things around and get things figured out. I just thank you guys for hanging with us in a late one after a rain delay and what was just really like a downer of a football game for everybody. I know Rocky appreciates it, and I very much appreciate it. If you guys aren't, please follow Rocky on Twitter at Rocky Magana. I'm Steven Serda. That's where you can find me. Please subscribe, rate, and review everything that we're doing on the Arrowhead Pride Podcast Network. If you are listening to the podcast, make sure you stick around immediately after this show. We will have all of the post-game press conferences for you. And as always, we're going to get this thing figured out. We hope so. I think brighter days are ahead for this Kansas City Chiefs team. I don't believe that they are this bad, but sometimes teams need these kinds of wake-up calls. Yeah. So thank you guys for joining us on the Arrowhead Pride Rapid Reaction Show. In the morning, make sure you are looking out for the Arrowhead Drive. We have that for you every single Monday morning. Get you up to date on all the Chiefs news that you need to know. And then tomorrow afternoon, make sure you are keeping an eye out for the Out of Structure podcast with Ron Kopp and Matt Stagner. They will have a full breakdown of this game, everything that went wrong, and what the Chiefs will hopefully be working towards this week in trying to fix it. So, Rocky, thank you so much for joining me. We'll talk to you guys soon, and hopefully it'll be on a more positive note.
Yeah. Hey, this game was a bummer, but you know what's not a bummer? You, Chiefs Kingdom. We appreciate you guys.
Yeah, we're here for you. We'll talk to you guys soon.
All right.